Okay, so this is the Gilded Age, and I wanted to talk to you guys about the political cartoons here that you couldn't really see the other day because we had internet problems. So this is a rich industrialist. He's handing out, it says boodle, so it's just big, huge amounts of money. It's got the people here. It says we own the city, the taxpayer, BDD, and so they're being paid off. This says railroad shares, railroad shares. So this is supposed to be a specific person, probably Cornelius Vanderbilt. So it says, "Do as you please with the streets of New York." Our mark. So it's again, it's just money. It's being paid off. Then you have Pullman. Pullman represents another person from the railroad industry. Here you've got, it says employee, low wages, high rent, and they're being squeezed in between them. So it's got plutocracy, which is like oligarchy. It's like ruled by a few. You got capitalism, monopoly, wage slavery. So, and then as this person's being squeezed, money is coming out of them. So we already talked about this, but we'll go over it again. So it's the Gilded Age. What does gilded mean? If you don't know, you can look it up. But like gilded is if you take something, it doesn't matter what it is, you can coat it in like gold leaf, gold paint, a thin layer of actual gold. So it looks like it's worth something, but it might not actually be worth anything below the gold. So Mark Twain, he wrote this book about this particular American period, and he named his book The Gilded Age, and it referred to like American society being gilded. So it has this like rich exterior, but really it's all based on this rotten core. So industrialists and capitalists, they had earned like enormous amounts of money over the last 10, 20 to 30 years. And they began to live in what was almost like another world, like in a way that even plantation owners in the South didn't live as well as they did. And that was a system that was based on, slavery. People saw that as evil and wrong. And yet something in the North had evolved to be almost the same thing, where you have this small group of people who are able to buy furs and silk, gold, jewels. They have servants that take care of them. These servants are paid a wage, but they're still doing things like washing them, getting them dressed, serving them food, taking care of their children. They live in these mansions. They're, huge. They're just gigantic places, and it's mansions. It's not one mansion. They have a home in the city, and they have homes throughout the country. And then they travel abroad from the United States to Europe. And then beneath all of this, there's these shady dealings that are going on between these industrialists and then politicians in Washington, in like the various states like New York State and Ohio, places like that. And it leads to economic and social unrest. So this is Cornelius Vanderbilt's home on Fifth Avenue in New York City. So Cornelius Vanderbilt, he used to be a steamship owner, and then he switched to railroads, and he became very, very wealthy. And this is his home. Okay, like that's the size of a person right here. That's the size of his home. And as you're going to see later, and you can actually see back in these other areas, like this is like hundreds of people could have occupied this same amount of space. And instead it's just a single family. And these are other mansions. So Fifth Avenue, if you think about it, like Fifth Avenue is, I think it's the name of like a store, but like it's still there in New York, but it represents wealth. So Saks Fifth Avenue. And then this is the same family. This is the Vanderbilt family, but this is their home in North Carolina. It's called Biltmore Estate. And people go there now because it's like an attraction, and people pay money to go inside. It's a museum. So you've got, this is like an indoor, it's an arboreum. It's like a place where they would have like exotic plants from different parts of the world. And it's North Carolina, so it gets cold in the winter, and this is able to keep them alive. And you've got, this is where there's a giant spiral staircase inside. You can look up Biltmore House or Biltmore Estate and see the interior. But this is to give you that context for the size of this place. I mean, it's just absolutely enormous. Absolutely enormous. And this is, again, one family lives here, and this might be where they spent their summer, or they might spend the weekend. And then this is the Rockefeller estate. It looks smaller than the Vanderbilt estate, but Rockefeller is one of the richest people ever to live. And this is the size of his home. This is his private residence. And of course, he would still have homes in the city. So he would have homes in Cincinnati, Cleveland, New York as well. And then this is Andrew Carnegie's mansion on Fifth Avenue. So he lives, in the same general area as Cornelius Vanderbilt. Notice the gates now. So they're keeping themselves separate. And then these are the homes that most people lived in. So you've got these ramshackled, literally shacks that are built out of whatever materials they can find. So it's rough sawn wood. It may or may not have windows. Okay, they're going to leak when it rains. They're highly susceptible to fire. When these places do catch on fire and burn down, new places that are eventually put up are made out of brick. So these are the tenement houses that will replace it. Like these windows don't represent like if you were to take these 4 or 5 windows, right? That doesn't represent an apartment. That would represent 5 apartments. What this apartment has in the back, which is pretty unique for its time, is it has balconies. And eventually these balconies they'll figure out that it would be a good idea to have a set of ladders going down, like a fire escape. And then over here, this is the lavatory system. So no matter how many people live in these tenements, which could be, hundreds of people, they all use these same bathrooms. So there'd be one for, maybe a few for men, a few for women. No toilet paper. Remember, people would just use like a catalog. They put pages out, use that. There's a little tricycle. And when it rains, these things will fill up, and the refuse, the urine and the feces will be just laying out here, and then they'll dry up, and then this is where kids play. This is not a green space. If we go back and we look at these, there's plenty of green spaces for these super wealthy people, and there's nothing for the common people who vastly outnumber. Another example, so again, we've got like a balcony for people to go to. People would hang their laundry. There's no privacy spacing, so theft is always going to be an issue. These do have windows, though, glass windows. Again, there's no indoor plumbing, meaning there's no running water either. So if you need water, you have to go outside and get it. If you need to go to the restroom, you go outside. People just throw things from literally their balconies out onto the streets. The streets are disgusting. They're not paved. And this is a really good example of 1870s, 1880s, 1890s, because there's no cars yet. It's all being freight is being moved. People are being moved by horses. And then this is an example of like not a city, but like a bigger town, but not like a huge town. So like more like a suburb of Flint. Suburbs don't exist yet, but so there's homes, and these are single family homes. They're narrower, and they do have some yardage is what they would call it. It's really small though, and the streets are no better. They're still filthy. There's very little green space, if any, but this is still better than this. So urban life is crowded and not very pleasant. The other thing to pay attention to is see the bulbs. This is the size of the bulbs that were being used, the glass that would cover the bulbs that were inside. So they've already electrified. There's no electrification here. However, this pole would be bringing power eventually, but it also brought like the telegraph and, of course, later the telephone. So we can compare and contrast the families, the way that they dress. These people are wearing suits. They have watches. They have jewelry, big hats, feathers. They look happy. They look like they're well fed, well coiffed, maintained. You look at this family. There's the father. You can see his knees are discolored on his pants. The son's got a tie on. The little girl looks kind of dirty, looks pretty tired. Looks like she's probably too big for that bed. You can see it bowing. There's the mother. But you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 kids. Okay. This is probably multiple generations of family. So mom, dad, it could be grandparents as well, aunts and uncles, cousins. This is just one set of families. And they're all living in one room. So there's the door. There's the closet. There's a window. It has glass, though. And then notice just the state that the room is in. It's going to look dirty like this because this is going to be a coal-fired stove, and that soot's going to get all over the place. All right, so we have this rapid growth of industry. It made the U.S. economy expand rapidly. Remember, I talked about how we jump to first place. So here's the numbers that we're going to be using. So in 1870, we were producing 77,000 tons of steel per year, 5 million barrels of oil, and we had 53,000 miles of railroad track laid. By 1900, so 30 years later, there's 11 million tons of steel. That is just exponential growth. 63 million barrels of oil, also exponential growth, and then 200,000 miles of track, railroad track. So it's almost 4 times greater. And essentially, this is all because of 3 specific entrepreneurs: Andrew Carnegie, Rockefeller, and Vanderbilt. So there's new ways to buy things. So in cities, they'll have districts, which will be shopping districts. Okay, so like if we go back real quick. So these would be shops. That would be the business district, right? And then up here would be where people live. So these would all be storefronts. You can see people selling things there. So this is going to develop. There's going to be department stores too, like Marshall Field in Chicago, Sears and Roebuck. They're just like you would think of a department store today. They sell a little bit of everything, but they're not like the department stores of today where you would walk in and just kind of wander around and try to figure out what you wanted. Instead, people would come up to you, attendants, people that work there, and they would wait on you. They would treat you, they ask you if you want a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, or Coca-Cola. They would help you try on clothes. I mean, it was a different level of service. Of course, department stores were primarily going to be for people who were middle and upper class. Then we have Woolworths. This is the first chain store. So it's a store you can find it in like New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Ohio, Indiana, even up in Michigan. And they have a similar layout, and it's like the precursor to like Meijer or Walmart, places like that. So they sell the same stock throughout each of its chains. And then advertising begins. So people put up billboards to sell products. Magazines are printed, and then there's entire sections of newspapers which are filled full of ads or adverts. And then there's catalogs like the Montgomery Ward and Sears catalog. Now remember, people did order out of this, but they also used them to wipe their bottoms. So an entrepreneur, so this would actually be the 4th of the different factors of production. Remember, you had land, labor, and capital. So entrepreneur is really, it's the 4th one, and it's just as equally important as the other 3. So an entrepreneur is a risk taker, and they're able to combine the other factors of production to create either a new business or a new way to do things, like build things or make things. So life in 1890 is really a lot different than, between like these industrialists and then like regular people. And what I mean by that is like Carnegie makes $25 million in 1890. And he lives in a 4-story, 64-room mansion in New York City, where the average industrial worker would make $440 per year. They lived in a dirty, cramped room with other workers in poor ventilation. And, even for married couples, mom, dad, and the kids would work, and they didn't each make $440 because women were paid less and children were paid even less than that. And so when wages were cut, say at first maybe dad is the only person working, if dad's wages were cut in half, so he's making $220, that difference would have to be made up by mom working and the kids working too. And that's just to maintain the level that they were at. So $25 million for Andrew Carnegie. A postal employee was making about $900. A clerical worker was making over $800. Ministers, just below $800. Gas and electric workers throughout cities, about $700. Railroad workers were making about $550, so that would be a better job than working in a factory. Then you've got manufacturing workers, remember, $440. Coal miners make $400, and then school teachers make about $275. So just to give you some sort of context, if you were to take Andrew Carnegie's net worth from that time, the $25 million, it would be $373 billion today. And the richest man in the world in 2020, as of today, is Jeff Bezos, the CEO of of Amazon, and he's estimated to be worth 184.9 billion. Okay, that's crazy. Think about all of the things that Amazon is involved in. They've got their own. They make movies. They have their own online streaming service. They sell goods. They ship goods. I mean, they are everywhere, right? And he's not even worth half of what Andrew Carnegie was. And Carnegie made one product, and that was steel. Well, we're back to social Darwinism again. So what was social Darwinism? Remember, this is people who espoused like that the reason why there are differences between the classes is it's based on evolution, and they tried to prove this through eugenics. And then they're saying essentially that the people that have money are more fit to survive, and the poor are intended to be that way, and that if they can't somehow evolve or work their way through what they're going through, then they're supposed to die. I mean, that's literally what they thought. So was this social Darwinism in action? That's what they would have believed. They would have believed that people like Carnegie and Vanderbilt buying up these different companies and forming these one gigantic monopolies was scientifically what was supposed to be happening. However, they're not taking into account things like economics, where there's a huge downturn in the economy, and then all of a sudden a whole bunch of companies are going out of business. Well, your company is unaffected for whatever reason. Like Vanderbilt's was unaffected to the degree that other railroads were, because he had a rail line between Chicago and New York. He still got hurt, but not as much. So when these other companies around him went bankrupt, he was able to buy them up and incorporate them into his company. So vertical integration, right? Or I'm sorry, not vertical, horizontal integration. So here's a lie it's still believed to this day, that hard work equals reward. And so many people to this day will say things like, well, if poor people would just work harder, they would be able to get themselves out of poverty. Where if you look at the actual research, a single mom who is poor because she's working up to 3 jobs, but for minimum wage. And none of those 3 jobs is full time. So she's working 30 hours at one job, 20 hours at another, 15. So she's actually working in excess of the 40 hours. So it's not that that poor people don't work hard. It's that the amount of pay that they get, and it's not commensurate with the amount of hours that they work. So Andrew Carnegie, he was born in 1835 in Dunfermline, Scotland, and he was a poor weaver's son. His father was involved in like unions over there, and he also believed that political action was going to be required for the working class to make any sort of gains. And he got himself into trouble over there. Not Carnegie, but Andrew Carnegie's father. So in 1848, the whole family, they moved to America. And this is Carnegie. He's 13 years old. He started working in a cotton mill, and he made $1.20 a week. He saved that money, and he was able to invest it. And soon, he invested in like railroads and things like that. He was able to make $50,000 a year, so significantly more than the average person. And he gained control of steel plants in Pennsylvania, and by 1889, his income had risen to $25 million a year. That's Carnegie's younger brother. And Scotland is right here if you don't know. So we're over here. So in June 1889, Andrew Carnegie wrote an article that he called Wealth, and it would later be put into a book called The Gospel of Wealth, in which he said rich people had to use their money for the improvement of mankind. And this work is considered to be the foundation in the field of philanthropy. And one of the most powerful lines in the book is, "A man who dies thus rich dies disgraced." And the answer was to give money away and build things that benefited society. And we call this philanthropy. So a person who does this, we call them a philanthropist. And they did this in a variety of ways. They built libraries, museums, music halls, all kinds of things. Now, Carnegie's philosophy, it began in 1911 with the creation of the Carnegie Corporation of New York, which still exists to this day. And it was founded specifically to give grants to promote the advancement of knowledge, education, and to build libraries throughout the United States. And also to help, it specifically helped in the construction of over 2,500 public libraries. And it helped establish cultural institutions like Carnegie Hall. And also it helped to establish Pell Grants, which you will receive when you go to college. And also it helps pay for Sesame Street, which you may have watched when you were a child. The idea with libraries is there weren't schools at the time. However, if people could learn to read and then learn to read books, they could improve their station in life and then thus make more money and then be able to move out of poverty. So this is Carnegie Hall. This is what it looks like on the outside. This is what it looks like on the stage. Okay, it's massive. This is what it looks like to be seated up in the upper balcony in the back, looking down. And then this is what it looks like to be on the stage, looking out. And so, people, this is like the pinnacle. Like if you get called to play at Carnegie Hall, you've reached like epic levels in your artistic career, whether it is playing piano or singing or dancing, whatever. So it's a big deal. Rockefeller, he's going to follow in the example that was set by Carnegie, and he will contribute about $600,000, which is more than $25 million in today's money, to help found the University of Chicago in 1890. He will also establish the Rockefeller Foundation, which will give away more than $500 million to various educational, religious, and scientific causes. It will support medical research, education, whether that's like grants that people are looking to get to study things, or build schools, build like buildings on campuses of universities, and also the arts themselves. The Rockefeller Medical Institute is going to actually help find a cure for yellow fever, which was killing people in the tropics from like Africa, Central America, and into Asia. So it's a huge deal. So this is the University of Chicago, which was in part funded by the Rockefeller money. It still exists. It's a top tier school. Then we have Cornelius Vanderbilt. He, like I said, he got to start in steamboat ferrying, meaning moving freight from one place to another. And then in 1862, he sells the steamboat business and he gets into railroads. This is the same year that Congress will pass the Transcontinental Railroad Act. So like railroads are going to be more and more important. He ends up owning a lot of railroad lines, and he sets up the first direct route between the city of Chicago and New York City. So he's going to be able to take meat that is butchered in Chicago and then frozen. He'll be able to ship that to New York, and then it'll be manufactured into steak and hamburger, stuff like that. And he makes a lot of money off of it. So Vanderbilt's only major philanthropy was in 1873 when he contributed $1 million to help found Vanderbilt University, which he named after his grandson, in Tennessee. And that $1 million contribution, though, today, if you were to adjust it for inflation, is still $21.6 million. And then we've already seen where the Vanderbilts spent their money. And that was the construction of large homes. So this is Vanderbilt University in Tennessee. All right, what I want you to do now is I want you to figure out, are these people robber barons, meaning that's a negative connotation? Like, did they steal and that's how they made their money? Or are they captains of industry, meaning they took a risk and it paid off for them and that's why they deserve their money? So it's pages 173 to 175. However, you do not have this textbook, okay? It's a PDF. It's the last 2 pages of I think it might actually be the last 3 pages of the PDF. So look there. It's like attached to an assignment. And what you're doing is you're making a T-chart, and you're going to show on one side of the T-chart the good things that these people did, Carnegie, Rockefeller, and Vanderbilt, and then on the other side, the bad things that they did. There's a few questions that you have to answer, and that's what I'm expecting you to do. So that's your assignment for the day. Here's another political cartoon. So these are the 4 men that we're talking about, Carnegie, Rockefeller, people like that. Now we've got, this says millions. This says Goulds, because there's a guy named Jay Gould, another railroad person. Millions. Vanderbilt, millions. Okay. Somebody named Sage. And here you have all of the different things that are made, right, by laborers. And it's being seen as like a wall, right? And then this says hard times. That's the waves coming in. Again, it says hard times in the back here. See lumber, and look at the working class. They're the ones that are holding this whole system up, but they're also the people that made these things: the cloth, the linen, the ironworks, the lumber. So, I mean, this is a powerful. It's a powerful political cartoon. And the other thing is, you can see this. It's a little bit harder. This is more artistically inclined, but these look like train cars, and these people are railroad men. Okay, so there we go. The other thing, notice it's a pickaxe and a hammer, which these are going to be symbols for communism, which does exist at this time. This is from Life magazine too. Another example of a political cartoon. Here you have the different states, and these are supposed to be the capitals of the states. And here you have, it says $100 million given for the public good. You've got Carnegie dressed in a Scottish kilt, right? So he's pouring money. He's got his golden, oh gosh, what do you call these things? It's this golden scooper, and he's pouring it down. So it's actually making fun of him. You know, I mean, it's saying, is this really what America wants? All right, robber barons. So I'll give you a better understanding of what that means. It means these are people that gained wealth by driving other people out of business. So they didn't earn it. They, in a sense, stole it. They raised prices. They limited competition because they formed monopolies. They robbed the nation of its natural resources. They bribe politicians. They pay low wages. The poor that work in their factories work under really terrible conditions. And they are the reason why there's lots of inequality in the United States during the 1870s to 1900. Or are these people captains of industry? Did they work hard? Did they take risks? And do they deserve the riches that they have? They took advantage of new technologies, like specifically Carnegie with the Bessemer process, or Vanderbilt with, the purchase of railroads and the building of new train cars and train engines. They came up with new ways to finance and organize their businesses, and that's why they were able to be more efficient than their competitors. They created millions of jobs. There's no question about that. And there's this new middle class which has grown out of what they've created, because you have managers, clerks, people like that. The standard of living for everybody does go up, for everybody. Now, it's not super fantastic, but people have money to spend. People have things to buy that they never have ever dreamt of before. People are going to the movies. People are able to go to sporting events, like there's baseball, football, basketball, things like that. And America emerged as one of the most powerful nations in the world because our economy was so much better than it had been, before 1860. All right, so that's the end of the presentation. What I want you guys to look at is the Gilded Age T-chart real fast. Okay, this is the PDF. And I took pictures of it. You can zoom in. Okay, there's my thumb. And you do not have to read all of this because we actually covered this stuff already. But the last 2 pages, it's going to take a second to catch up. There it goes. There's another example of horizontal and vertical integration. There's the political cartoon we looked at. All right. So robber barons or captains of industry. That's the last thing that we talked about. Okay. So I would like you to read these pages right here, Gilded Age, from industrialist to philanthropy. And then you'll use that to fill this out right here, which is the I call it a T-chart. I mean, it's a little hard to do on a Google Doc. But so I've got industrialist, Andrew Carnegie, Rockefeller, Vanderbilt. You'll list the good things here, and it's going to be multiple things, and you can put them in brackets. They don't have to be in complete sentences. Okay. Then you're going to answer these 4 questions, and then you're going to turn it in, and that's what you have. This is it for the Gilded Age. So tomorrow when we're in school, I will give you guys the questions that I'm going to want you to answer. You're going to have time to work on it in class. Then you can take it home and finish it, and you'll turn it in to me Sunday night. Okay? That's where we're at. Thank you, guys.